Welcome to the Coach Post Show. This is the last week of the regular season, and it's Championship Saturday for 3 of the 4 conferences here in Super Region 2. We have a really exciting day of football set up on Saturday with some really exciting championship games and some Gulf South games that are going to decide, I think, ultimately that conference and have some playoff implications. But the Gulf South not having a championship game, we have 3 or 4 big games with them as well. So a really, really exciting day of football. It's hard to believe we're talking the last week of the regular season here in 2023. The season has flown by. We are really excited about it. I think we're going to have some really good football this week, and we're going to dive into it. We're going to break down every championship game that we're going to see here within Super Region 2, kind of look at what we think the winners and the losers will look like and some of the keys to the game. So without that, we're going to hop right in, and we're going to take a look at Championship Saturday. We have 3 really, really good games. The first game we're going to talk about is the South Atlantic Conference Championship. It's a 4 p.m. kickoff, and that's going to be Lenoir-Rhyne at Tusculum. Lenoir-Rhyne comes into this game 9-1, 7-1 in the South Atlantic Conference. You look at Tusculum, they come in at 6-4, 6-2 in the South Atlantic Conference. And this game is at Tusculum because the game was pre-decided that the host was going to be the Mountain Division champion. And so the Bears will travel to take on the Pioneers at 4 p.m. here on Saturday. You can find that game on Flow Sports. And when you look at this game, there's a lot of intriguing matchups here. This is a matchup we saw a couple years ago in the COVID spring, but we haven't seen them play very much in the regular season as of late. And so we're going to look at this thing in a couple different perspectives. And I think the first thing we got to look at is the Bears offense. And it's really hard to, as you start breaking it down, to really decipher. But, Dwayne McGee, he rushes for 117 yards per game, has 9 touchdowns on the season, over 1,000 yards in the regular season. And he's a name that's going to stand out when you break down a game and stand off the stat sheet as you start looking at the Bears offensively. Couple that in with Xavier Turner-Knox and Zaire Dillard, both bring a kind of a 3-man punch to the Bears offensively in the run game. And then the quarterback for the Bears, you have Ferguson, Jalen Ferguson, and Sean White. Ferguson is 108 of 150 in the air. White is 56 of 94. Both of those guys have garnered South Atlantic Conference recognition this season, most recently White this past week. And you look at that, they have 2 really good trigger pullers under center for the Bears. And then on the perimeter offensively, Diari Rogers, 37 receptions, leads the way for the Bears. Couple that in there with DeAndre Lester with 25. And we're forgetting names on the offensive side of the ball. That offensive line is able to establish the run, and they do a great job protecting the quarterback, allowing them to throw the football around. So the offense for the Bears is solid. They take care of the football. They're methodical in what they do, and they put up points offensively. And you flip that over, and you look at the defense for the Bears. Andre Jefferson, he leads the Bears with 7 sacks. John Ross May, linebacker, is a leading tackler for the Bears with 75 tackles. Defensively, they're a dip and dunk defense. They make you earn it. They make you work your way down the field. They're not going to give up the big plays. They're not going to give up the big shot plays. They make you earn it, and they're a very physical group. And so this Bears team is a very complimentary on both sides of the football. Couple that in there with a very strong special teams game. Lenoir-Rhyne is a very, very difficult team as they sit here and they look at this game in a championship perspective, but also as they start preparing, what we think is going to be a playoff run. Flip that over and you look at Tusculum. This is a gritty group, and not a lot of people talked about them this season. They've kind of had a little bit of a slower year. They've come on as of late, which has been fantastic. They beat Mars Hill in double overtime this past weekend. So if you watch that game, you're going to know a lot of what I'm about to talk about with the Pioneers. And you can't talk about the Tusculum offense without talking about Matt Palazzo. He takes over at quarterback this season, averages 221 yards per game in the air, 19 touchdowns. He is a dynamic quarterback. He's not a pocket passer. He's a guy that can run. He can extend plays. And he's got 104 rushes for 129 yards. Not afraid to tuck the football and run. And just adds a different element, adds a different dynamic for the Pioneers offense. And that kind of that 1-2 punch, a little zone read action. And then you look at Tyler Burke. He's the leading receiver for the Pioneers with 664 yards, 4 touchdowns. And you have a very explosive, they have a tremendous running back room, and with Palazzo's ability to run the football, they kind of have a unique zone read option look, and they're able to throw the football deep downfield, so it really puts defenses in binds, both in the run game and in the pass. Flip it over, look at their defense. You've got Ernest Johnson III. He gives you 67 tackles per game, 3.5 sacks. Wesley Scott, although is the leading tackler for the Pioneers, has 75 tackles and a forced fumble defensively. When you think of Tusculum, you think of the physical, gritty defense that they have year in and year out. That to me that's kind of their staple. You know they're going to be physical. You know they're going to be gritty. But it's how much can they come on offensively. And when I look at this game, I think there's a couple keys to this game. For Tusculum, if they want to have a chance against Lenoir-Rhyne, I think they need to protect the football. They're -8 in the turnover battle this season, and they have to stay disciplined. We saw a lot of penalties last week against Mars Hill, and those penalties against a team like Lenoir-Rhyne, extending drives for the Bears, is going to result in points. And so I think they need to stay disciplined. I think they need to control the turnovers, not turn the football over if they want to have a chance to win. But ultimately, this is going to be a very physical game on both sides. I think the Bears are a little bit more complete on both sides and special teams, and I think Lenoir-Rhyne is going to win a very physical matchup between the Bears and the Pioneers this weekend. So it should be a fun game to watch, but ultimately I think the Bears are just a little bit better, particularly in crunch time when it's needed. Next game we're going to talk about, and this is probably the hardest game to talk about as we look at the championship games on Saturday. It's the CIAA championship between Virginia Union and Fayetteville State. This game's a 3 p.m. kickoff up in Salem, Virginia, and very, very exciting matchup. And when you look at it, Virginia Union coming into this thing at 9-1, 7-1 in conference play. Fayetteville State is 8-2 overall, and they're undefeated at 8-0 in conference play. And so a very, I think, even matchup, and probably a game that's going to be, as we break this thing down, it could really go either way. I think there's some keys to this thing that you can make a path for both teams winning. Notably, though, they met earlier this year. Fayetteville State came out on top 10-7 in a game that Jada Byers did not play in. So he is back, and Virginia Union's offense seems to be clicking and functioning at an extremely high level coming into this one. But let's take a look at that Virginia Union offense, right? We just talked about that, having Jada Byers there. We've noticed a spark for the Panthers. They have the best scoring offense in the CIAA this season. They average 39 points per game. They're second in total yards per game with 398, 229 on the ground, which is best in the CIAA. And they can throw the football a little bit at 168 per game. That ranks them 7th in the CIAA. When you flip that over and you compare that to the Fayetteville State defense, they're 3rd in points given up at only 14.8 points per game. Their defense is 4th in the league at giving up 265 yards per game. 3rd in that rush defense, they only give up 97 yards per game. And the pass defense is where there's a little where it goes down a little bit, and they're middle of the pack in the CIAA, giving up 168 yards per game. So when you look at this, a very strong run defense and a very strong line of scrimmage control by the Broncos to a very strong run game by Virginia Union. So this is intriguing. I think that's really going to be the determining factor in this game, but we'll talk about that more in a second. When you look at the Fayetteville State offense, this is where they just haven't really hit their stride, I don't think. They're 10th in the league in scoring at 17.4 points per game. Offense averages 274 points a game. That's 9th best in the CIAA, and they've struggled with only 131 yards through the air per game. And let's flip it now. Let's look at that Virginia Union defense. They're top scoring in the CIAA at 11.8 points per game. They're second, giving up 230 yards per game, give up 37.4 yards on the ground, and that defense gives up 192 yards in the air. That's 10th best in the CIAA. I think what we're going to see here in this game is a very physical game between the offense of Virginia Union and their attempt to establish the run, establish the ground game, and that stingy Fayetteville State run defense. Some odds and ends when you break this game down, you really look at the stats, and it's a very pretty evenly matched game, I think. Fayetteville State They give up the least amount of sacks with 9. They have a great offensive line that controls the line of scrimmage. They don't give up the sacks, and they're able to protect the quarterback. So that's going to be interesting to see if they can continue to do that this week. Virginia Union leads in interceptions with 18, 3 of them for touchdowns. The Fayetteville State leads the league in sacks with 26. And Fayetteville State averages 47 yards per game in penalties. That is best in the CIAA. Virginia Union averages the most penalty yards, however, at 79 yards per game. And then the Virginia Union red zone defense is the best in the CIAA, only allowing scores 38% of the time. So some just odds and ends, there I think that can have an impact in this thing. And when you look at it, I look at this game and I think it's a really hard game to predict. But I'm ultimately going to stay, I think, with my pick earlier this week. In the defense is going to carry it for Fayetteville State. If they can control that line of scrimmage and they can control the penalties that extend drives, I think that's going to be their keys to win this thing. Giving up only 47 yards per game in penalty yards, but then also they lead the league in sacks at 26. So if they can control that line of scrimmage, control the unnecessary penalties that extend drives, I think that's going to be the key. And we've talked about it in big games. Defense travels, and I think their defense is going to be the difference in this one in a very close game, very similar to what we saw earlier this season. And then the last game is going to be the SIAC Championship, or the SIAC Championship, rather, between Albany State and Benedict, and that is at 2 p.m. kickoff in Atlanta, Georgia, and that game can be found on ESPN. This game is going to be a matchup of a 10-0 Benedict team, undefeated in conference play, against a 6-4 Albany State team who is 6-2 in conference play. And this game is all about, can the Albany State offense keep up with the Benedict offense? And I don't know that can happen. When you look at this thing, Benedict's offense is number 1 in scoring at 41 points a game. They average 410 yards per game. They rush for 157, and they throw for 252. The offense is dangerous. They can put points up. They can move the football. Their defense is stingy. They give up a league best 8 points per game. They only give up 209 yards of offense, and they only give 82 of that up on the ground. Their pass defense gives up the rest at 128. So they have a very explosive offense. Their defense is stingy. They find a way to keep you out of the end zone. When you flip this thing over and look at Albany State, they rank 7th in the league with 25 points per game, averaging 347 yards per game. And that defense, though, for Albany State is pretty stingy themselves. They only give up 19 points per game. That's second best in the league. And they're third best in giving up 323 yards per game. Ultimately, I think it's really going to come down to, can the Albany State offense function and outscore Benedict? I don't think that can happen, and I think Benedict is going to stay perfect and go back-to-back in conference championships here in 2023. A very exciting weekend, and then don't forget, some really good games down the Gulf South Conference. They don't have that championship game, but Valdosta State, West Georgia, just to name one that I think is going to have some implications here in the playoffs as we start looking here in the last week of the regular season. So really exciting day of football. Championship Saturday is going to be a lot of fun. If you like what we're doing here on the Coach Poe Show, please subscribe, share, so we know that you like what we're putting out. And we appreciate you sticking it by all season, and it's been a long season, but we are excited now as we start barreling down into the playoffs. Selection Sunday is this week, and hopefully next week we'll have a little bit more clarity and a whole lot to talk about as we start looking at the playoffs here in 2023. As always, enjoy your football Saturday, and we'll see you next week here on the Coach Poe Show.